Welcome back to the Budget Gamer channel, where we bring you critical and in-depth reviews of just about every indie game we can get our hands on, and today we're going to be taking a look at Golden Force for the Nintendo Switch. And while this game looks absolutely incredible, it might not look as incredible for very long. And if you think that comment's about the game's length, then you probably really should stick around for the complete review. Starting off with the story in the Golden Force, you're a team of four, I guess, swashbucklers or buccaneers or, I don't know, mercenaries. And you're pretty much just out to get your hands on as much gold as possible because you spent all your fortune on your last vacation. And yeah, as light and bubblegum as that is, that really is the motivation to carry out one of the most technical and intense platformers I've played in a little bit. As a classic themed action platformer though, you can expect a good amount of platforming, a good amount of action, but above all that, a good amount of death. And to set the pace for the game is actually its tutorial. And whereas in most other games tutorials, all the pogues are still learning how to jump and shoot at the same time, in the tutorial for Golden Force, you're actually learning how to take down a gigantic screen-filling boss with multiple stages to its attack pattern. And yeah, this is the tutorial. You will learn how to jump, you will learn how to dash and use your special attack, you will learn how to lunge and slide, and you will learn how to die with the utmost of grace and dignity until you manage to get past the game's very first area. But after defeating the behemoth Kraken as your tutorial boss, you actually will be set up with a pretty good foundation of the controls for the game while you get into the rest of its technical levels and even more challenging bosses to follow. And so while having an actual boss as the very first introductory element to the game is pretty darn brutal, it's actually also pretty darn brilliant. Moving into the actual game though, the entirety of Golden Force only takes up a couple of levels. But each of those levels is divided into 5 stages, with 3 stages preceding the boss level, and then a Part B level that can only be accessed through certain special circumstances. And so you'll only have to clear the first 4 stages, including the boss, to move on to open up the map further. Each one of the spots on the map will be entirely unique, and you can expect if the platforming is unique and the environments were completely redesigned, the boss fights are also going to be a whole different animal from whatever you managed to experience before. But as with the fundamentals of classic gaming, the level design itself should provide you with the skills that you'll need to take down the boss. And whether that's a focus on sliding or dashes or charged moves, or maybe it's a focus on pirouetting and using your charged move as a double jump and trying to find ways to magically float across the screen from bounce platform to an in-game zipline, there will be more than enough opportunities to fail until you get it right. Thankfully though, the game's developers didn't go all out pedantic retro and did throw us a bone with some checkpoints. Earlier levels might only have 1 checkpoint because they aren't as challenging and are fairly short. But the further you get into the game, more checkpoints are added, and thank Jeebus, there is a pre-boss checkpoint. Bosses in Golden Force are no joke, and honestly I haven't encountered boss fights like these for quite a while in my gaming history. They're massive, they're ornately beautiful, and they have ever-evolving attack patterns. And so yeah, you'll be dying a lot just trying to get a handle on what exactly the bosses can do and how they move, and where the hazard spots and weak points are. But saying that each boss has a unique attack pattern might be a little bit misleading. It's more like each boss has its own series of move sets that it can actually choose and pick between almost at random. And so while in total Golden Force really does rely a lot on player reflex, it also relies on memory, but it never allows you to get too comfortable. Because even if an attack is the same, that attack's trajectory might be slightly randomized. And so just like the pressure to get through the level, the pressure to get through the boss fight will rely mainly on the player's skill. Moving on though, and looking at Golden Force's presentation, it is an absolutely gorgeous game that is hugely reminiscent of those early SNES and Genesis era games. The colors are vivid, the graphics are beautifully animated, and I mean, who doesn't love it when a boss really seems like a boss and takes up half the screen? And if you were wondering, the audio package of the game as well is really beautifully done and matches not only the setting of the game, but the era the game is supposed to emulate really well. But with all of this praise, there are a few things about the game that we could easily call critiques and we'll be talking about now. And one of those would be the callback to the beginning of the review where I said that the game is gorgeous, but it might not look as good for very long. And no, with how brutally intense the game is, Golden Force will take a long time to beat. But the deeper you get into it, the more it taxes the Switch's tiny little processor, and whether this is due to the flaws in the mechanics of the Switch itself or due to some work in the porting, the further you get into the game, the more evident the frame rate drops and a bit of lag will actually be. And while the enemy complements and level design are fairly sparse earlier in game and don't tax the Switch that much, once you make it into the second world, and especially with your first fight with General Burrito, you will most certainly be made painfully aware of some frame rate drops that can cause you to mistime a jump or a dodge and end up robbing you of a good bit of your health. And so in that sense, while Golden Force is inarguably an absolutely beautiful action platformer, it does come with a bit of a price. And so if you are a real stickler for 60 frames per second because you're normally a PC gamer or you just bought the PS5, yeah, you're probably not going to experience anything close to that. However, there is one more thing about the boss fights that might be the nittiest of pickings, which also has to do with the boss's movesets. I've played lots of games in the past where I fought a boss and it seemed like the boss's movesets were incremental and staged to its HP. And in all honesty, that's pretty typical. But one way that Golden Force actually changes it up is while the boss's movesets do change and are linked to its HP, they also seem to be somewhat linked to a timer. Which means that once you get a boss to that critical point to get it to change its moveset, it will stop taking damage until the next moveset starts. And while that's certainly not game-breaking, it just feels like it subjects the player to a little bit too much damage, especially while those bosses and their massive HP bars are already so difficult to beat. I mean, if you do get in a groove and you're picking away at the boss, there should be no point in the game that stops the boss from taking damage. But hey, maybe that's just me. Another note about Golden Force, though, is in its genre. It is an action platformer, but it also has a somewhat roguelike element with allowing you to purchase upgrades for your character. If you are a 100% gamer and you go out and you're the type of person who farms all the collectibles, you're really gonna love some of the benefits you can get, such as increased health or increased attack damage. But you will have to hunt. And not only that, sometimes when you find a collectible, you'll have to sacrifice one of your lives just to get it. So even if you do find the rare collectible that you need to purchase that unlockable upgrade for your character, if your platforming skills are not on point, you may as well not even try. But taking a step back and looking at Golden Force as a whole, it is a pretty flippin' awesome game. It looks beautiful and it is truly iconic of that previous SNES and Genesis era. Level designs were set up to make you learn the skills you needed to fight the boss organically, but being that Golden Force is so highly technical and requires a lot of skill and a lot of really precise timing, the frame rate drops and the occasional lag spikes really do heavily impact a lot of the gameplay, especially toward the critical end of those boss fights. And so while you can learn around it, if you're expecting Golden Force to be as fun and goofy as its storyline, you're probably expecting the wrong kind of experience. But if you're a fan of technical platformers like Celeste or Super Meat Boy, and you're willing to struggle through some of the mechanical flaws such as diminished frame rate, then Golden Force might be an amazing experience. But anyway, that does about wrap up the review of Golden Force now on the Nintendo Switch, so if you enjoyed the review, or especially if you found it helpful, feel free to throw us a like or a comment to show your support, and don't forget to click that little bell icon when you subscribe to stay updated with the latest content. Because as you can see, there are new and unique indie games coming out literally every single day. And whether it's an easy hard pass or an unforgettable gem, chances are if it's on the Switch, you're gonna find out about it right here. But anyway, this has been The Budget Gamers. As always, thanks for watching.